Commander Vex'hal clicked his mandibles in what passed for amusement among the Korvani fleet. The bridge of the dreadnought Void Striker hummed with the usual pre-battle excitement, crew members adjusting their carapaces and checking weapon systems with practiced efficiency. "Sir, the human cargo vessel has been intercepted," reported Navigation Officer Cleth, her voice carrying that delicious anticipation that always preceded an easy raid. "It appears to be—" "Well, sir, it looks like a flying scrap heap." Vex'hal's compound eyes focused on the main display, and he had to resist the urge to burst into what humans might call laughter. The vessel before them was indeed a sorry sight. Rust patches dotted its hull like some kind of metallic disease. Jury-rigged components stuck out at odd angles, and the entire thing looked like it had been assembled by blind younglings playing with construction toys. "Humans," he said with obvious disdain, his voice carrying across the bridge. "The so-called terror of the galaxy. Look at that pathetic excuse for a spacecraft. My personal shuttle has better armor plating." The crew shared appreciative clicks and buzzes. After all, who hadn't heard the ridiculous stories? Humans, the mythical species that supposedly conquered half the known galaxy before mysteriously vanishing. Humans who could allegedly survive in the vacuum of space and eat molten metal for breakfast. Humans who built ships so advanced that entire civilizations trembled at their approach. Complete nonsense, of course. "Open a communication channel," Vex'hal ordered, settling back into his command throne. "Let us see what these legendary warriors have to say." The screen flickered, revealing the interior of what appeared to be a maintenance closet. Pipes and cables ran everywhere. Sparks occasionally showered down from the ceiling. And somewhere in the background, an alarm was wailing with the enthusiasm of a dying animal. A figure stepped into view, and Vex'hal had to suppress another wave of amusement. The human was small, barely reaching the chest height of an average Korvani warrior. Its skin was pale and looked ridiculously fragile. Its hair was an unremarkable brown color, and it wore what appeared to be overalls covered in grease stains. This was Captain Maya Torres, though she looked more like a janitor than a starship commander. "Ah, hello there," Maya said, waving a wrench in what might have been a greeting. Behind her, someone was shouting about a coolant leak, and the alarm continued its melodious death song. "I'm guessing you folks aren't here to offer roadside assistance." Vex'hal's mandibles clicked again. The human's casual attitude was almost insulting. "I am Commander Vex'hal of the Korvani raiding fleet. You will surrender your cargo immediately, or we will take it by force." Maya scratched her head, leaving a streak of grease across her forehead. "Well, Commander Vex? Vex something. I hate to break it to you, but our cargo bay is currently flooded with radioactive coolant. Unless you really want 3 tons of contaminated farming equipment, I'd suggest you find someone else to rob today." The bridge crew erupted in amused chittering. The human was either incredibly brave or spectacularly stupid. Given their reputation for the latter, Vex'hal was betting on stupidity. "You mistake me for someone who cares about your mechanical failures," the commander replied smoothly. "Prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in your immediate termination." Maya's expression didn't change much, but something flickered in her eyes. For just a moment, Vex'hal thought he saw something that made his exoskeleton itch uncomfortably. Then she smiled, and the moment passed. "Well, if you insist," she said cheerfully, "but don't say I didn't warn you. Oh, and, Commander, you might want to bring some extra ships. Just a suggestion." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in silence except for the usual hum of systems and the quiet breathing of the crew. "Extra ships?" Navigation Officer Cleth's antennae twitched with confusion. "Sir, that vessel couldn't fight off a pleasure yacht. Their weapon signatures are practically non-existent." Vex'hal nodded absently, but something about the human's parting comment bothered him. There had been something in her tone, a confidence that didn't match her situation. Still, what could one ancient cargo hauler do against a full Korvani battle group? "Launch boarding shuttles," he ordered, "and prepare to dock. This will be over in minutes." The shuttles deployed smoothly, their sleek forms cutting through space toward the derelict human vessel. Vex'hal watched the operation with satisfaction. 20 of his best warriors, armed with the latest plasma weaponry and protected by military-grade combat armor. Even if the humans had some surprises hidden aboard their rust bucket, it wouldn't matter. The first shuttle made contact with a soft thud that echoed through both ships. Boarding clamps engaged, cutting torches began their work, and within moments the breach was complete. Vex'hal switched to the helmet cameras of his boarding party, watching as they poured through the smoking hole in the human ship's hull. The interior was even worse than the exterior suggested. Corridors were barely wide enough for his warriors to move single file, pipes leaked various colorful fluids, and the lighting flickered with the reliability of a dying star. It looked like the maintenance tunnels of a space station, not the interior of a supposedly functional spacecraft. "Target located," reported Squad Leader Thorax, his voice crackling through the communication system. "One human, female, appears to be the same individual from the transmission. She is sitting in a chair, reading something." The camera feed showed Maya Torres, still in her grease-stained overalls, sitting calmly in what passed for the ship's bridge. She looked up as the boarding party entered, marked her place in what appeared to be a technical manual, and smiled pleasantly. "Oh, hi there," she said, as if greeting neighbors at a backyard barbecue. "That was faster than I expected. Coffee?" Thorax's confusion was evident, even through his helmet's voice modulator. "Human, you will surrender immediately or face immediate execution." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "Right, of course. The whole surrender thing. Here's the issue with that." She pressed a button on her chair's armrest, and suddenly every screen on the Korvani bridge lit up with incoming contact alerts. Vex'hal's blood turned to ice as he watched the tactical display populate with ship signatures. Not just any ships. These were massive, sleek vessels that seemed to materialize from nowhere, their hulls gleaming with an almost mirror-like finish that spoke of advanced metallurgy and engineering beyond anything in the Korvani database. "Sir," Cleth's voice was barely a whisper, "we're reading 20 human warships, all dreadnought class or larger. They just appeared. Our sensors didn't detect anything until they were already here." On the boarding party feed, Maya was still smiling that infuriating casual smile. "The thing is," she continued, as if the conversation hadn't been interrupted, "when you've been hauling cargo through dangerous space for as long as I have, you learn to make friends with people who can watch your back." The lead human warship was close enough now that its details were becoming visible on the main screen. Vex'hal felt his mandibles lock as he took in the sight. The vessel was easily 3 times the size of his own dreadnought, its hull smooth and unbroken except for what appeared to be weapon ports. Lots and lots of weapon ports. "This is Admiral Jackson Hayes of the Earth Defense Fleet." A new voice came over the communication channel, and this one carried none of Maya's casual warmth. It was cold, professional, and carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Commander Vex'hal, you will immediately withdraw your boarding parties and return to your own vessels. You have 30 seconds to comply." Vex'hal tried to speak and found his voice had abandoned him somewhere between disbelief and terror. The human fleet had formed up around his battle group with the precision of a well-rehearsed dance, and he was suddenly very aware that his 5 ships were hopelessly outnumbered and outgunned. "Sir," Weapons Officer Grex spoke up from his station, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Their energy signatures are... Sir, I've never seen readings like these. Each of those ships appears to be carrying enough firepower to level a moon." On the boarding party feed, Maya had gone back to reading her manual, occasionally glancing up at the heavily armed Korvani warriors as if they were mildly interesting house guests. "You know," she said conversationally, "you really should have taken my advice about bringing extra ships, though to be honest, I'm not sure it would have helped." Vex'hal finally found his voice. "Admiral Hayes, there has been a misunderstanding. We were simply conducting a routine inspection of 15 seconds, Commander. The tone left no room for negotiation, no possibility of diplomatic maneuvering. Vex'hal had heard that tone before, usually right before someone died messily. "Thorax, withdraw immediately," he barked into his communicator. "All boarding parties, return to your shuttles now." "But sir, the mission is over. Move." On the tactical display, one of the human warships was beginning to glow along its weapon ports. It was a subtle thing, barely noticeable, but it sent ice water through Vex'hal's circulatory system. He had seen that kind of energy build up before, usually right before entire enemy fleets ceased to exist. "Time's up, Commander," Admiral Hayes announced, and his voice carried a finality that made Vex'hal's exoskeleton want to molt in terror. Maya looked up from her manual again, catching the camera feed from Thorax's helmet. "Oh, and boys? When you get back to your ship, you might want to check your historical databases. Look up the Battle of Proxima 7, the Siege of New Geneva, and just search for why you don't pick fights with humans. It's educational." The last of the boarding party stumbled back through the breach, their retreat barely organized enough to avoid being called a rout. Vex'hal watched the shuttles dock with relief that he tried very hard not to show to his crew. "All ships, prepare for immediate withdrawal," he ordered. "Maximum speed, any heading that takes us away from here." "Sir," Cleth said hesitantly, "Admiral Hayes is requesting a communication." Vex'hal considered his options, realized he didn't have any good ones, and nodded grimly. "Put him through." The screen filled with the image of a human male who looked like he had been carved from granite and disappointment. His uniform was crisp, his bearing spoke of decades of command experience, and his eyes held the kind of cold calculation that made smart people very nervous. "Commander Vex'hal," Admiral Hayes said, and his voice was the auditory equivalent of a formal execution notice. "You attempted to board a civilian vessel under the protection of the Earth Defense Fleet. In normal circumstances, this would result in your immediate destruction. However, Captain Torres has requested clemency." On a smaller screen, Maya waved cheerfully. "They seemed nice enough," she said, "just a little confused about who to pick fights with." Admiral Hayes continued without acknowledging the interruption. "You will leave this system immediately. You will not return. You will spread word throughout your organization that human vessels are not to be interfered with under any circumstances. Is this understood?" Vex'hal's vocal cords felt like they had been replaced with rusted wire, but he managed to croak out an affirmative response. "Excellent," Hayes replied. "Oh, and Commander, the next time you decide to raid cargo ships, I suggest you do your homework first. The galaxy is full of interesting surprises." The communication cut off, leaving Vex'hal staring at a blank screen. Around him, his bridge crew was already implementing his withdrawal order with an efficiency born of pure survival instinct. As the Korvani fleet limped away from what should have been an easy raid, Vex'hal found himself thinking about legends, about stories that seemed too incredible to be true, about the difference between myth and reality, and how sometimes that difference could be measured in the number of incredibly advanced warships that appeared when you least expected them. Behind them, the human cargo vessel. Lucky Strike continued on its way, looking for all the world like a collection of spare parts held together by hope and stubborn refusal to fall apart. Its escort fleet had already vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared, leaving only the memory of power barely restrained. And somewhere in the depths of space, word began to spread among the pirate fleets and raiding parties that had grown fat on easy prey. Word that the humans were not legends after all. Word that some myths were more dangerous when they turned out to be true. Word that maybe, just maybe, it was time to find a new line of work. 3 standard cycles later, the ripple effects of Vex'hal's encounter had spread across the Outer Rim territories like wildfire through dry vegetation. Every cantina, every smuggler's den, every pirate stronghold buzzed with whispered conversations about the human incident. Most dismissed it as exaggerated tavern tales, but those who knew Vex'hal personally found the story disturbingly believable. Captain Zara Voss of the independent freighter, Stellar Nomad, certainly believed it. She had traded with humans for the better part of 2 decades, back when they were still considered a minor species barely worth acknowledging. Now, as she sat across from her longtime human contact in the neutral port of Haven Station, she couldn't help but reassess everything she thought she knew. "So, Marcus," she said, her scaled fingers drumming nervously on the table, "want to explain why half the galaxy suddenly thinks your people are walking nightmares?" Marcus Webb, a middle-aged trader with prematurely gray hair and laugh lines around his eyes, chuckled into his coffee cup. "Oh, you heard about that?" Maya always was a show-off. Zara's reptilian features managed to convey skepticism remarkably well. Maya Torres, that walking disaster magnet who held her ship together with prayer and industrial adhesive. She's the one who scared the infamous Korvani raiders into changing careers. "Well," Marcus said thoughtfully, "Maya and about 20 of Earth's finest warships. Minor detail." The Zalarian captain leaned back in her chair, her tail twitching with agitation. "Marcus, I've known you for 20 years. You sold me coffee beans and told me jokes about human bureaucracy. You never mentioned commanding fleets of invisible death machines." Marcus's expression grew more serious, though the humor never quite left his eyes. "Zara, my friend, there's a lot humans don't mention. We're polite that way." Before she could respond, the cantina's main screen flickered to life with a news broadcast from the Galactic News Network. The anchor, a professional-looking Andromedian with perfectly coiffed tentacles, was discussing the day's lead story with barely contained excitement. Reports continue to filter in about mysterious human naval activities throughout the outer sectors. The Hegemony Council has issued a formal statement requesting clarification about Earth's military capabilities, while several pirate syndicates have reportedly disbanded entirely rather than risk encounters with human vessels. Marcus watched the broadcast with mild interest while Zara's coffee cup trembled in her grip. On screen, grainy footage showed what appeared to be a human fleet performing maneuvers near the Antares system. The ships moved with a fluid precision that spoke of technology far beyond what anyone had suspected humans possessed. "Marcus," Zara said carefully, "exactly how long have you people been pretending to be harmless cargo runners?" "Oh, we're not pretending," Marcus replied cheerfully. "We really are harmless. Maya's a sweetheart who wouldn't hurt a fly. Admiral Hayes makes excellent barbecue and volunteers at orphanages. Captain Rodriguez over there," he nodded toward a human woman at the bar, "knits sweaters for her grandchildren." Zara followed his gaze to see Captain Elena Rodriguez, who was apparently deep in conversation with what looked like a group of very nervous Korvani traders. Even from across the room, Zara could see the traders flinching every time Rodriguez laughed. "But," Marcus continued, his tone growing slightly cooler, "we do take exception to people trying to rob our friends. Call it a character quirk." The news broadcast had moved on to expert analysis, featuring a panel of military strategists and xenoarchaeologists debating human intentions. Professor Crix of the Centaurian Institute was gesticulating wildly with all 4 of his arms. "The historical evidence has been there all along. Human expansion patterns, their unusually advanced materials science, the way their colonies always seem to survive situations that would destroy other settlements. We simply chose to interpret the data as luck rather than design." His colleague, Admiral Thex of the Hegemony Defense Force, looked considerably less comfortable. "What concerns me is the stealth capability. Our sensors detected nothing until those ships were practically on top of the Korvani fleet. If humans have been moving military assets around the galaxy without our knowledge..." Marcus muted the screen with a gesture that seemed almost casual. "You know, Zara, there's something I've always appreciated about our friendship. You never asked too many questions about where humans came from or why we seem to have such good luck avoiding the nastier corners of space." Zara's scaled skin had taken on a distinctly pale shade. "I thought you were just clever traders with good information networks." "We are," Marcus assured her. "We're also the descendants of a species that spent most of its evolutionary history figuring out new and creative ways to kill things that were bigger, stronger, and better armed than we were. Turns out those skills translate surprisingly well to space." At the bar, Captain Rodriguez had apparently finished her conversation with the Korvani traders, who were now filing out of the cantina with the rapid, purposeful stride of people who had somewhere very important to be that wasn't here. Rodriguez caught Marcus's eye and raised her glass in a casual salute. "Elena's got a gift for making friends," Marcus observed. Those traders were asking about safe shipping routes through human space. Apparently, their usual piracy insurance doesn't cover acts of human. The cantina's door chimed again, and this time the new arrival caused a noticeable hush in the conversation. Commander Vex'hal entered, looking considerably less imposing than he had aboard his flagship. His once pristine uniform showed signs of hasty repairs, his mandibles clicked nervously, and his compound eyes darted around the room as if expecting ambush from any direction. Marcus waved him over with the casual friendliness of someone greeting an old acquaintance. "Commander, how nice to see you again." "Well, not again for me personally, but Maya sends her regards." Vex'hal approached their table with the careful movements of someone walking through a minefield. "Human, Marcus," he said formally, his voice carrying none of its former arrogance. "I come seeking information." "Of course you do," Marcus replied, gesturing to an empty chair. "Please sit. Can I buy you a drink? I hear Korvani brandy goes well with humble pie." The former pirate commander's mandibles clicked in what might have been embarrassment. "The Korvani raiders have disbanded. My crews have found employment in legitimate shipping concerns. We no longer engage in acts of piracy." Zara nearly choked on her coffee. The Korvani raiders had been terrorizing shipping lanes for the better part of a decade, and now their leader was talking about career changes? "Smart move," Marcus acknowledged. "The benefits package is probably better too. Health insurance, retirement plans, significantly lower chance of being vaporized by invisible warships." Vex'hal's compound eyes focused on Marcus with desperate intensity. "Human, I must know. The stories spreading throughout the outer rim, they speak of human fleets that appear from nowhere, of weapons that can crack planets, of technologies beyond current understanding. Are these stories true?" Marcus considered the question while sipping his coffee. Around them, the cantina had grown quieter as other patrons strained to hear the conversation. Even the background music seemed to have dropped a few decibels. "Well, Commander, that depends on your definition of truth. Are humans capable of building fleets of advanced warships? Obviously. Do we have weapons that could theoretically crack planets? That's more of an engineering question than a military one. Do we possess technologies beyond current understanding?" He shrugged. "Current understanding by whom?" Vex'hal's exoskeleton made a sound like grinding metal. "You're not denying it." "Why would I? You asked for information, and I'm giving it to you. Humans have always been honest about our capabilities. The problem is that most species assumed we were either lying or delusional." Captain Rodriguez had apparently finished her drink and was making her way toward their table. As she approached, Zara noticed that she moved with a kind of casual confidence that spoke of someone who had never met a situation she couldn't handle. "Marcus, are you corrupting the local wildlife again?" Rodriguez asked cheerfully, settling into the fourth chair without invitation. "Hello, Captain Voss. Commander Vex'hal. Lovely evening for existential revelations about the nature of galactic power structures, isn't it?" Vex'hal's mandibles were clicking so rapidly they sounded like maracas in a hurricane. "Captain Rodriguez, your reputation precedes you. The stories say you once destroyed an entire pirate fleet with a single ship." Rodriguez looked genuinely puzzled. "Which fleet?" "I mean, there was that incident last month near Rigel, but I wouldn't call 6 ships an entire fleet. More of a flotilla, really." "6 ships," Zara repeated faintly. "You destroyed 6 ships, by yourself." Oh, not by myself, Rodriguez corrected. I had a full crew of 12. Teamwork makes the dream work, you know. She paused thoughtfully. Though, to be fair, most of the actual fighting was handled by the ship's AI. I mostly just told it which targets to prioritize. Marcus nodded approvingly. Elena's always been modest about her accomplishments. She doesn't like to mention that she holds the record for fastest resolution of a hostile boarding action. What was it, Elena? 17 seconds. 15, Rodriguez corrected. But that included travel time to the cargo bay. The actual combat portion was much shorter. Vex'hal made a sound like air escaping from a punctured habitat dome. 15 seconds? There were 27 boarders. Were being the operative phrase. Rodriguez agreed pleasantly. Past tense is important in these situations. The former pirate commander slumped in his chair, the weight of his new reality settling over him like a lead blanket. We never stood a chance, did we? Any of us. All these years of preying on shipping lanes, thinking we were the apex predators of space. Oh, you were definitely predators, Marcus assured him. Just not apex ones. More like middle management predators. Regional supervisors of modest intimidation. Rodriguez patted Vex'hal on what might have been a shoulder if Korvani anatomy worked that way. Don't feel bad about it, Commander. Humans have been letting people underestimate us for centuries. It's practically a cultural tradition at this point. The cantina's main screen had switched to a different news program. This one featuring live footage from the Hegemony Council chambers. The session appeared to be in full swing, with representatives from dozens of species gesticulating wildly while the human ambassador sat calmly at his desk, occasionally taking notes. Demand immediate disclosure of all human military assets and capabilities. The Andromedian representative was shouting, his tentacles writhing with indignation. The galactic community has a right to know the true extent of Earth's naval forces. Ambassador David Kim looked up from his notes with the patient expression of someone who had been expecting this conversation for a very long time. Honored representatives, Earth has never hidden our military capabilities. Our naval records are publicly available. Our ship manifests are filed with the appropriate galactic authorities, and our defense budgets are a matter of public record. But the stealth technology, another representative interjected. The advanced weaponry. The fleet compositions that don't match your filed reports. Ambassador Kim's smile was diplomatic and utterly without warmth. Ah, I see the confusion. You're assuming that what you could detect was everything we had. That's charmingly naive. Marcus chuckled as he watched the broadcast. David always was good at these diplomatic tap dances. He could make "we could have conquered you at any time," but chose not to sound like a compliment. On screen, the Hegemony Council was erupting into a cacophony of outraged voices in dozens of languages. Ambassador Kim waited patiently for the noise to die down before speaking again. Honored representatives, let me be clear about humanity's position. We have no interest in conquest, subjugation, or galactic domination. We prefer trade to warfare, diplomacy to destruction, and mutual cooperation to mutual annihilation. However, his tone grew noticeably cooler. We will not tolerate attacks on our citizens or our allies. This has always been our policy. The only thing that has changed is your awareness of our ability to enforce it. Vex'hal was staring at the screen with the fascination of someone watching their own funeral proceedings. They're terrified, he whispered. The most powerful civilizations in the galaxy are terrified of a species they barely acknowledged 3 days ago. Welcome to the human experience, Rodriguez said dryly. We've been the most dangerous species in the galaxy for decades. The only difference is that now everyone knows it. Zara finally found her voice again. But why? Why hide your capabilities? Why let everyone think you were just another minor spacefaring race? Marcus and Rodriguez exchanged glances, some silent communication passing between them. Finally, Marcus sighed and set down his coffee cup. Because, my dear Zara, we've seen what happens when the galaxy knows exactly what humans are capable of. We've read the historical databases, studied the patterns. When a species reveals true military superiority, one of two things happens. Everyone either submits immediately and you become reluctant overlords of a galaxy full of resentful subjects, or everyone bands together to destroy you before you can destroy them. We prefer option 3, Rodriguez added. Stay quiet, make friends, handle problems discreetly, and hope nobody notices until it's too late for the panic to make things worse. The broadcast continued in the background, but the cantina had grown quiet as patrons absorbed the implications of what they were hearing. The galaxy was changing, had already changed, and most of them were only now beginning to understand what that meant. Vex'hal looked up from his contemplation of the table surface. What happens now? To the rest of us, I mean. To the species who built their power structures on the assumption that humans were harmless. Marcus considered the question seriously. Honestly, probably not much. We still need trade partners, still want friends, still prefer cooperation to conquest. The main difference is that now when we say, please don't attack our shipping, people are more likely to listen. And if they don't listen, Rodriguez's smile was friendly and absolutely terrifying. Well, Commander, I think you already know the answer to that question. As if summoned by their conversation, the cantina's communication system chimed with an incoming general broadcast. The voice that emerged was calm, professional, and carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed immediately. This is Admiral Hayes of the Earth Defense Fleet. All vessels in the Haven system are advised that we are conducting routine patrol operations in this sector. Civilian traffic should proceed normally and disregard any unusual sensor readings. That is all. Through the cantina's viewports, running lights became visible in the distance. Not many, and moving in patterns that suggested careful formation, flying, rather than aggressive positioning. But their mere presence sent a clear message to everyone watching. The humans were here, they were paying attention, and they wanted everyone to know it. Marcus raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. To the new Galactic Order, ladies and gentlemen. Same as the old Galactic Order, but with better enforcement. Zara raised her cup with shaking fingers. To surviving long enough to see tomorrow. Vex'hal's mandibles clicked one final time before he managed a credible imitation of human laughter. To learning that legends are only legends until they decide not to be. Outside, the human patrol continued its careful dance among the stars, a reminder that some myths were more dangerous when they turned out to be true. And in cantinas and trading posts throughout the galaxy, the conversation had already begun to shift from humans aren't what they seem to what do we do now that we know? The answer, as it turned out, was surprisingly simple. Exactly what they had always done, but with considerably better manners.